We all go around with this feeling that we're the authors of our lives, that we're in control of our decisions, that we could have done otherwise. To what extent are we in control of our decisions? Generally, we have a feeling that we are in control of our life decision and sometimes our environment more than we're capable. For instance, there's certain place in the brain that if you stimulate, you can make people do certain things like laughing. I believe that if we understand the relation between conscious mind, preconscious, and unconscious, it may help us understand what we can control and what we can't. Sigmund Freud used to say that the mind is like an iceberg. It floats with 1/7 of its bulk above the water, where the conscious mind consists of all the mental processes in which we are aware. The preconscious contains the thoughts, the feelings that a person is not currently aware but can be easily be brought to consciousness. Lastly, the unconscious mind is the primary source of human behavior. Therefore, like an iceberg, the most important part of the mind is the part that we cannot see. In the Odyssey, the ancient Greek warrior Ulysses, while sailing home from his long adventures, he was told about the sirens. The sirens were monsters posing as beautiful women who would sing to passing ships, hoping to lure them closer to kill them. Ulysses was worried about the sirens ahead of time and knew that his subconscious would be unable to resist the beautiful sirens. So Ulysses, knowing what he would be powerless, he made a conscious decision ahead of time to have his crew fill their ears with beeswax and tie himself to the boat to control himself, and so they successfully sailed by the sirens and farm. You can think this as a conflict between the later unconscious and the present conscious, the struggle between having the will to act as one wishes. Ulysses, knowing he would be powerless against the songs of the sirens and their beauty, he made a smart decision to tie himself up. He knew later that he would not be in a position to control his decisions. It shows the power and the influence of the subconscious in our decision and behavior. The Odyssey teaches us many lessons about life, faith, goals, misfortunes, and vengeance. My favorite being the lesson of the sirens. In philosophy and literature, one finds three main approaches to the problem of free will: determinism, libertarianism, and compatibilism. Determinism is a philosophical view that all events are determined by purest existing causes. For example, many physicists today hold the belief that the entire universe is a single deterministic system, any given paradigm is bound by causality. Libertarianism, no relation to the political philosophy to go by its name, argues that free will is logically incompatible with the deterministic universe. Libertarianism states that since agents have free will, determinism must be false. Lastly, compatibilism is the belief that free will and determinism are mutually compatible and that it is possible to believe in both without being logically consistent. This position was championed by the ancient Stoics. This is the ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus. He's the founder of a highly influential school of philosophy. Epicurus provided the first argument for libertarian free will by stating the following: some things happen of necessity, others by chance, others through our own agency. Moreover, he argues that as atoms move through the void, there were occasions where they will swerve from their deterministic paths, thus initiating new causal chains, therefore permitting humans to possess free will in an otherwise deterministic universe. He was saying, the first thinkers to look for explanatory causes in natural phenomena rather than the goals controlling events were the pre-Socratic philosophers, in particular Democritus. Is considered to be the first deterministic. He claimed that all things around us, including humans, were made of atoms in mostly empty space. Democritus say, by convention, color, by convention, sweet, but in reality, atoms and void. Democritus' main philosophy was that of determinism. His ideas about physical determinism and logical necessity led him directly to the modern problem that we still face free will, which versus determinism. He once declared that nothing occurs around him but everything for a reason and by necessity. Today, Scientists and philosophers who consider themselves libertarians believe that human agency magically arises above the physical causation. They sometimes invoke a metaphysical entity, such as a soul, an inner self that has control of our self, thoughts, and actions. In order for libertarianism to make sense, they have to assume that the agent or individual must be able to make more than one possible course of action under a given set of circumstances. In addition, libertarianism holds that if our behavior is fully determined by background causes, it must follow that free will is an illusion. As mentioned earlier, compatibilists was championed by the Stoics. The Stoics were mostly compatibilists. They believe in a complete deterministic universe and also that humans had free will. And they also assert that the two did not came into conflict. The Stoics were mostly known to teach that virtue is the only good for human beings, and external things such as health, wealth, and pleasure were not good nor bad in themselves, but only have value as material to act with virtue by humans. Today, the most popular view on free will is compatibilism. It has produced a vast literature on the problem of free will more than any other area of an academic philosophy. Compatibilists generally claim that a person is free to make choices as long as he or she is from the inner and outer events that will prevent someone to act against his or her choices and intentions. However, I think compatibilism has many issues with it. For example, where's the freedom in being satisfied in own thoughts, intentions, and actions when they're already product of past experience in our lives which we didn't create? There's a famous experiment made in the early 80s by physiologist Benjamin Levitt. He famously used EEG to show that activity in the brain motor cortex can be detected some 300 milliseconds before the person feels that he has decided to move. As you can see in the picture, these subjects are looking at a ball going around a circle to measure the time in which they made the decision to move their hands. And what Benjamin found was brain activity before the subjects decide to move their hands. In other words, his findings seems to suggest that the conscious decision didn't cause the movement. The brain activity bringing about the movement started before the individual had the urge to move his wrist. Some think that this is the proof that free will is an illusion. Others question the results and say that Libet's findings do not apply to more complex conscious decisions. These findings are difficult to interpret and what to make of them. The fact that there is a brain activity moments before you are aware of what you will do next, a time gap where it seems you have a complete freedom to behave as you please. Your brain had already determined what to do next. You then become aware or conscious of your decisions and makes you feel like you are in the process of making the decision. However, you are only a witness of your actions and thoughts as they happen. Are we making decisions in our lives? Do they appear in our brain as electric activity before we become conscious of them? More recently, More recently, there was a study published in the Neuron Journal called Internal Generative Reactivation of Single Neurons in Human Medieval Frontal Cortex, where they record activity of 1,019 neurons while 12 subjects performed a self-initiating finger movement. They found neurons recruitment movements over 1,500 milliseconds before the subject report making the decision to move. Furthermore, it was sufficient for the researchers to use 256 neurons to predict the movement of the subjects with accuracy greater than 70 milliseconds prior to subject awareness. What would it take to actually have free will? Well, we need to be in control of our brain chemistry, different states of mood, emotions, physiology. We need to be in control of our heartbeat, producing red blood cells in our body, and so on. Furthermore, we will need to be aware of all the factors that determine our thoughts and actions. We will need to be in control of all those factors in order to have free will. This is a paradox. Since everything influences everything, we're not responsible for the circumstances we found ourselves. The genetic makeup we inherit from our parents, the time in history we were born, height, intelligence, creativity, and so forth. For instance, in this picture we have the Italian road racing cyclist Marco Pantani. Widely considered one of the best climbers of all time in professional road cycling. He won the Tour de France in Giro d'Italia in 1998. At 5'6" tall and 126 pounds, he was a perfect build for a mountain climber. He currently holds time records in many iconic racing mountains, including Mont Ventoux and Alpe d'Huez. Again, he didn't choose his perfect build to succeed as a road climber, nor did he choose to be born into a culture in Italy where the sport is very famous and there are plenty of opportunities to succeed as a cyclist, hence being a product of a deterministic outcome. This is iconic Alpe d'Huez mountain in southeastern France. It is used regularly in the Tour de France cycle race. Marco Pantani currently holds a record for the fastest ascent of the climb. The belief in seeing each other as free agents with free will has given us most of our ethical theories, including the idea of sin and holding people responsible for their actions. We have social pillars in our societies that assume we have some kind of freedom. The US Supreme Court has called free will a universal persistent foundation for our system of law, distinct from a deterministic view of human conduct. I believe an honest conversation, an intellectual discussion about the underlying causes of human behavior appears to leave no space for moral responsibility. Therefore, I think an understanding of the truth of free will and the human mind has the potential to change our sense of moral goodness and what it will take to create just society. Finally, the question of whether we have free will or not touches nearly everything we care about: relationships, values, religion, politics, feelings of personal accomplishments, emotions like guilt and pride. So much depends on our view of seeing each other as free agents capable of making rational decisions. And so, understanding the true nature of free will is a necessity. Thanks.